Hi, and welcome to PhysioMIMI. Today we're going to talk about getting PhysioMIMI set up so that you can use it. The first thing you need to do is to download the virtual machine image, and you can import it into VirtualBox or whatever virtualization software you use. In this one, though, because we created the images in VirtualBox, we'll be using that. It's free, it works very well, there's no reason not to use it. So let's do that. Let's look at the virtual machine in VirtualBox. The one thing we need to do before we can get started is to set up the port forwardings. This here is a look at this virtual machine that we've imported. Once you do that, you'll need to look at the settings and take a look at the network configuration. The port forwardings here, they're on the network tab and then the port forwardings button. The network port forwardings will help us to get into the virtual machine. The three that we need to have are for the web, that's HTTP, HTTPS, and Webmin. We don't need SSH though. So what you'll need to do is to set up the ports that you want here. Make sure that you use port 80 for the web, 443 for HTTPS, and 12321 for Webmin. We'll need to use Webmin in order to set up some parts of the virtual machine before we can use PhysioMIMI. And if you look here, you'll see that we've got some some ports set up, but these ports don't have anything to do with the ports over here. These are just the ports that we're going to use on our own machine. So once you've done that, once you've imported the virtual machine into your virtualization software and you've set up the port forwardings, you can start the virtual machine, which is what we've already done. And over here in this web browser, we can connect to Webmin. This is where we can begin to set things up. So the first thing we want to do is to log into Webmin. The address is going to be this. It's going to be https:// localhost, or whatever the name is that you're using for the server that's running PhysioMIMI, and then the port number, :12321. So there we go, I'll type in that address, and here I am, I'm logging into Webmin. By default, the username is pmconfig, that's for PhysioMIMI configuration, and the password is the word password. So I type that in, I hit login. Good, and now I'm looking at a list of options that I can use inside of Webmin. The first thing that we need to do is to change the password for Webmin because it's not secure. Otherwise, anybody can get in and reset these settings. So let's do that. Let's use the change passwords feature. You don't have to enter the old password, the word password. In this case, I'll change it to something else. In this case, I actually typed in a good password so we can see that it's been saved. That's good. And now we can go here to the System menu. I'll click on that to go back to the list of options. The next thing we need to do in Webmin is we need to set up the PhysioMIMI administrator account. This is the account that we're going to use when we log into PhysioMIMI to approve users and make any other changes that regular PhysioMIMI users won't need to do. So go ahead and choose that option for the PhysioMIMI administrator account and then fill out this form. I'll say that I'm using Case Western Reserve, that I'm in Cleveland, in Ohio, with this zip code. I'll make up a name, PM admin, and then I'll say that I'm this email address, and I'll pick a password. Okay, so once you've filled out the form, you can hit save. It tells you that the account has been reset. That's good. We'll use that in a minute. And we need to move on. The next thing we need to set is the PhysioMIMI site name. Here's how this works. There's an example here that gives you some text that you might need. When you deploy PhysioMIMI, you're going to have to connect to it from another machine. Now in this case, I'm running it on my own computer, so it's perfectly fine for me to say localhost. But that might not be the case for you. You might want to put PhysioMIMI on some server where you use it, and then you want to connect to it from other places. So in this example, I'm going to leave it as localhost, but if you had put it on a server called, as we show here, something like server 1, then you would say server 1 here. In my case, though, I do need to change a different port. I don't have PhysioMIMI listening on port 80. I need to get to it through the virtual machine on this port, 8080. You might need to do something like that too, but you can pick one of these examples. So for me, I'll say it's on port 8080, and I'll hit save. This actually takes a little while. It's going to save those changes under the hood, and that does take a minute. Once this finishes, the next thing we can do is worry about the SSL certificate, and that's what's coming up right here. We've changed the site name, so if we don't also change this, users will get annoying errors. So we'll do that. We'll go to the PhysioMIMI SSL certificate, and I'll fill this out the same way we did before. US, Ohio, and then Cleveland. I'm at Case Western Reserve, and for now I'll use this server name as my fully qualified domain name. In your case, though, if you had a server called server1.company.net, that's what you would have to put here. Okay, so we'll click the button to regenerate the certificate, and we wait a minute while that happens. The next thing we need to do is to set up the PhysioMIMI system mailer. This is a feature that sends mail directly out of PhysioMIMI, and it sends notifications to the users who need them. So a simple use for this is the following. Once you set up PhysioMIMI, if you want other people to log into it, you have to approve their accounts before they can gain access. If we don't have a means set up for PhysioMIMI to send you mail, then you won't know when there's somebody waiting to log in. So that's why we have to do this. We'll go to the system mailer. There's an awful lot of info here, but the most important thing we need to do is just make sure that we choose an email address where this can come from. Now, this email address is going to be what appears on outgoing messages, and it's going to have to pass through whatever mail server you or your organization use. So usually it needs to be a valid email address. It's a good idea to put your own email address in there. For me, I'm going to use the same address I used a moment ago. That's admin@mimi.localhost, but you'll need to put something real there. So I hit save. That change gets saved. And then there's one last thing we need to do. We need to set up the mail configuration, because this is only part of it. What we chose there sets the address that mail is going to be sent from, but there's also an entire mail server underneath the hood here running postfix. So we need to go here, and any settings that we need to use in order to make sure that mail can get out of our network, we have to set here. This can be kind of hard too, because it's difficult to know exactly what your organization requires. Most of the time, for example, you won't be allowed to send mail directly out of your computer. You'll have to submit it to some other SMTP server that accepts it. In fact, that's what I'm doing here. I went into the postfix mail server configuration, and I'm looking at general options. And in here, there's a very important setting. It's this one. It's send outgoing mail via host. So if you have an SMTP server that you have to forward mail to, this is where you set it. So most of the time, it'll be called SMTP. So you might say smtp.mycompany.net, whatever it's called. In my case, for the demo, I'm not using one, so I'll say deliver directly. But for you, you'll almost certainly want to put something in here. Anyway, once you've filled that out, you can scroll down to the bottom. You can hit save and apply, and we wait for that change to take effect. I'll go back to the main menu here. There's one last neat thing we can do. We can test our mail system and make sure that it's working correctly. That's email delivery test. You can fill out this form and try to send yourself an email and make sure that you receive it. If you don't get it, especially if you wait a few minutes and you still don't get it, then you can be fairly confident that your mail isn't set up correctly. So you can keep tuning your postfix configuration until it works. So I'll send myself a test message. I'll say, this is a test. I am testing my mail. And I'll hit this button to send the test message. Perfect. So now what I would do is I would go and read my mail, make sure I get this message. I won't show that here, but in this case it actually does work. I do receive it. That's actually all we have to do here in Webmin. Once this is done, we don't ever need to go into Webmin again unless some of our settings change later, like if we change the site name or we have to adjust how we connect to the mail server. So that's it. I'll go ahead and hit log out, and good, I'm logged out. So that's it. In the next video, we'll talk about beginning to use PhysioMIMI.